Jesus takes the disciples through a rigorous lesson on this particular day. Matthew chapter 14, John chapter 6, and Mark chapter 6 shows a depiction of what happens. John starts off by saying this in verse 12, chapter 6. He says, so when they were filled, he's talking about the 5,000. Jesus does this miracle where he tells them, how are we going to feed all these people? So you can imagine it's lunchtime, all right? Lunchtime, and he's on the mountain by the Sea of Galilee preaching and teaching. And he says, the multitudes are coming. How are we going to feed them? So it's feeding time. It's lunchtime. And there's a young boy with some bread and some fish. Jesus gives thanks, and the fish and loaves of bread are multiplied to the point where all 5,000 men plus women and children eat until they have their fill. But then he says that when all of them were filled, watch this, he said to his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain so that nothing is lost. Can you imagine, Miss Sophia, cleaning up the scraps of some 5,000 men, women, and children? You imagine that 7 acres of land, it says that they broke up in groups of 50, and there's scraps all over the yard. And Jesus says, go clean up after all of that. Go clean all that up. Jesus is teaching excellence here. He's teaching execution. He's teaching thoroughness. Because imagine if he had left the scraps. If he had left the scraps of fish, car would have been stinking, David. If he'd have left it, the yard would have been smelling terrible. And the residue of Jesus and his disciples would have been a horrible aroma. So he tells his disciples, clean up all the scraps. Clean up all the scraps. So he's telling his disciples, his followers, the sons, clean up. Clean up all the mess. Don't leave no remnants. So it says that they had cleaned it up, right? Gather up all the fragments so that nothing is lost. Therefore, they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, look, he's talking about the different people, the 5,000 men. Watch this. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world. This is John 6, verse 15. Look, therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. They were going to make him king. But it's a little K king. So they're going to make the big J Jesus, the big K king, and take him by force and make him into a little king for you to worship and put in a king's position. Jesus stops it all and says, no, that's not what's going to happen. And he says, disciples, go get into the boat. We're about to get up out of here. Y'all get in the boat. Y'all meet me on the other side. And then he says that he sends the multitudes away. Am I right? And in verse 22, right, when he says he sends the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now, when evening came, he was alone there. So look at the scope of time here. So we've got multitudes all day long. He teaches the disciples to serve with excellence. He teaches them how to clean up with excellence. He teaches them how to execute in fullness. He tells them, get into the boat. Now, a lot of times when people preach this text, they always say, and I did the mistake too, they said that they didn't know where they were headed. This is not true. They knew exactly where they were headed because the Sea of Galilee was their stomping ground. The Sea of Galilee, the city of Tiberias, the city of Capernaum, is all their stomping grounds. They know the Sea of Galilee. This is familiar territory. This is not foreign territory at all. This is familiar territory. If it wasn't familiar territory, it would not say that in verse 24, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. If the wind was not contrary, that means that I would be down to just flow wherever the wind took me. But for the wind to be contrary, that means that it's going against, it's going opposite. The word literally means against, opposite, antagonistic, First Lady. That the wind is antagonistic against my direction. Meaning as I'm trying to push against, the wind is pushing me back. Pushing me back. You're not making it across to where you're trying to get. Because imagine if I'm trying to go this way and the wind is blowing me to the south, I would just go to the south then. But they had a direction in mind. And the direction was also familiar. They go back and forth across the Sea of Galilee all the time. Familiar direction, familiar vessel, and clear direction. They're tossed by the waves, and the waves are contrary. All the while, he's up on the mountain praying. It's evening time, praying. And look at verse 25. Now in the fourth watch, I'm going to be out of here fast. Now in the fourth watch of the night, in the fourth watch, the first watch, does anybody know when the first watch is in biblical timekeeping? They would break the watches of the evening in shifts of 3 hours. The evening begins at 6 p.m. First watch would be 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Second watch would be 9 p.m. to 12 p.m. Third watch would be 12 a.m. Third watch would be midnight to 3 a.m. Fourth watch, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. You've been getting tossed since 4:30, 5 p.m., evening time, nighttime, midnight, to the darkest time of your life. And the thing that's funny about time is the more time goes by without Jesus' intervention, the more doubt, the more questions. Where is Jesus? Because imagine setting, Jesus is here physically. He's right up there on the mountain somewhere with all power. He just did all miracles. Where are you at? Because we're getting tossed. I would think that we can do 3 hours on the sea, 3 hours now. 3 hours of storm. Y'all not grasping the 3 hours. 3 hours. 3 hours of being on the water, period. Smooth sailing, whatever. 3 hours is a long time to be on the water. 3 hours of a storm from 6 to 9. Add 3 more hours. From 9 to midnight now. You know where they thought they was going home, Rachel. Look. Capernaum was the city that grown-up Jesus lived in. He was born in Bethlehem, fled to Egypt, grew up a little bit in Nazareth, but his teenage, young adult years was Capernaum, which means that their families, their friends, their businesses, they were going home. 3 more hours. I was supposed to be home by now, Elder English. I was supposed to be home from 9 to 12. And then add 3 more hours to that. You're looking at 9 hours of fighting fighting. You know, it wasn't motorboat. They wasn't running out of gas. They rowing. For 9 hours. And in the fourth watch. So imagine, here's first point here. Go to the, no, don't go there yet. Yeah, go to the first point. First point with the what does it look like? Yeah, that one. So, just because you don't know where Jesus is does not mean that Jesus can't see you. He's literally, when we went to Israel, we went to the Sea of Galilee. We went to the place where the Sermon on the Mount was preached. And there's now a synagogue there. Beautiful meditating garden there. And everywhere on this mountain is beautiful Sea of Galilean views. If Jesus is on the mountain, he has a full scope of you and your struggle. Jesus has a full view. Can you imagine? So Jesus is sitting on the top of the mountain, praying and watching for some 9 to 12 hours, allowing you and your friends and your brothers and sisters in the Lord fight against this antagonistic storm till you're at your wit's end, you're at your physical end, you're at your physical limit. After a hard day's work, Reggie, they did a full day of work, of service and ministry and making sure that 5,000 plus people, men, women, and children. You know how difficult it is to make sure the kids eat? Men, women, children, everyone is ministered to, fed, and cleaned up after. Now, after a hard day's work, you know how sometimes, Reggie, if we go with the man of God to Houston, we like, oh man, we got at least 3 hours till we at home. They was right across the water. So it was man, at least we not up in Jerusalem. We are at the Sea of Galilee ministering, so getting home is right there. Jesus is on a mission to produce something out of his disciples. Because there's no other reason for you to sit and watch me in my darkest hour struggling and not do nothing. There's no other reason for you to be in my mess, my fight, and not do nothing about it. You know, Jesus now puts them in a position where they are exhausted physically. And the thing is, there's a breaking. There's a breaking that God is intentionally squeezing out of his disciples. If you are a disciple of the Lord, I'll use myself for example. Every time I have to preach, it's something that I got to push through. Last time my toe was broken or something. This time I'm last night coughing and wheezing, snotting. It's always a weight that has to be bench pressed off my chest. You can't lift weights without the burn. And if you're lifting weights and you don't feel no burn, you're not getting no workout in. So there's something that God is breaking out of each and every one of you to the point where you must go through, you must struggle, you must fight, you must hurt, you must feel it, you must experience it. And the Father in Jesus has to watch for the whole day. And Jesus is intentionally just make sure y'all clean up after all them people.
Thank you for worshiping with us today. If you like this message, you can find the rest at cmllcstore.com. We invite you to join us again for our extraordinary worship services every Sunday at 10:30 a.m., Sundays at 4 p.m., and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Central, where Dr. Moody teaches how to understand the Bible, and you can get all your biblical questions answered. We look forward to connecting with you. We ask that you subscribe to The Rock ATX on YouTube and follow The Rock ATX on Facebook and Instagram to stay connected to all The Rock is doing. You can also get connected on our website at therockatx.org. Again, thank you for worshiping with us, and be blessed.